Designing around patents. How do you design around a patent? The analysis required to design around a patent does not involve the specification or anything taught in the written description or drawings of the patent application. The analysis required is an analysis of the claims of the patent that you want to design around. So here is the example claim I've been using for a while now, which is an apparatus comprising a first widget, a second widget connected to the first widget, and a gadget connected to the first widget and the second widget. So these are the limitations. They're called the limitations of the claim, and there are 3 limitations, and we want to avoid both literal infringement and infringement under Doctrine of Equivalents. So there are 2 types of infringement. For more information about how to determine infringement, see my video on patent infringement here. So Doctrine of Equivalents is the more involved analysis. We'll look at that second. First, let's look at the question of literal infringement. So for literal infringement, we're going to look at our own product. This box represents the product that we want to make that designs around the claims of this particular patent. So in our product, we look to see if we have the limitations of the claim present in our product as we want to develop it, as we want to sell it. So in this case, the first widget is present, so that's already a small problem. The second widget is also present and it's connected to the first widget. So we have the first limitation and the second limitation of the claim present in our prospective product. A gadget is connected to the first widget and the second widget. We also have a gadget and it's connected to the first widget and the second widget. So the product, as we want to make it and sell it, would be literally infringing this claim. So we don't want to do that. How do we design around it? So if it turns out through our research and development, we figured out that the second widget for our product is not necessary. Maybe when the inventor of the invention that's claimed here developed this idea, the inventor believed that the second widget was a necessity in order for this apparatus to function. But through further research and development, maybe you found out that the second widget is not a necessity, and so you can eliminate the second widget. So in your product, you eliminate the second widget. It's no longer connected to the first widget. It's no longer connected to the gadget. You have a first widget and a gadget that are connected to each other, but you don't have the second widget. In that case, you're no longer literally infringing this claim, because even though you have the first widget and you have the gadget, you don't have a second widget connected to the first widget, so you don't have that limitation at all. And as to the third limitation, even though you do have a gadget, it's only connected to the first widget, but it's not connected to the second widget. And so you do not have this limitation literally present in your product, therefore you're not infringing the claim. Literal infringement is no longer an issue for you. The next analysis to be done is Doctrine of Equivalents. Under Doctrine of Equivalents, you have to see if there's something in your product that's performing substantially the same function in substantially the same way, achieving substantially the same result. In this case, we've eliminated the second widget. If the second widget was there and it was producing some type of a result by its presence, and you determined that that result was not necessary for your product, that function was not necessary for your product, there is nothing there doing substantially the same thing in substantially the same way. It's not needed at all. Therefore, you can conclude safely that not only is your product not literally infringing this claim, but also you're not infringing the claim under the Doctrine of Equivalents. And you now can feel safe that you can sell your product without worrying about allegations of infringement based on this patent claim. Now, Doctrine of Equivalents is a complicated analysis, and courts may come to different conclusions based on the specifics of a patent and the specifics of an alleged accusing apparatus. So Doctrine of Equivalents is an analysis that has to be done very carefully, and you have to proceed cautiously when trying to design around patents based on the Doctrine of Equivalents analysis. A second way to avoid infringement is to replace one of the existing limitations. So instead of eliminating the second widget, let's say that you found a way to perform some kind of a function, whatever this intermediary function is, you found a way to perform it with something else, some other type of device. Let's just call it something else. So you replace this with something else. The something else is not the second widget. So in that case, you would still be avoiding literal infringement. You would not have the second limitation of the claim. You'd have the first widget, you'd have the gadget, but the gadget would be connected to the first widget and the something else. So you no longer have the second limitation and you no longer have the third limitation. You're not literally infringing the claim, but are you infringing it under Doctrine of Equivalents? That would be the most important analysis you would need to make in this situation. So you'd have to look very closely at the something else and see, is the something else performing the same function as the second widget, or is it doing something totally different? If it's doing something totally different in a totally different way, then you would at least have arguments against Doctrine of Equivalents. If it's performing the same function as the second widget, you may have a problem. So that analysis has to be done very carefully. So those are different ways that you can design around a patent claim. Again, design around means that you have to look at the claims of the patent that you're concerned about, and you have to decide, can you eliminate one of the limitations, or can you replace it with something totally different that performs a different function in a different way so that you can avoid both literal infringement and Doctrine of Equivalents analysis. If you can, then you have successfully designed around the patent claims and you can roll out your product without worrying that you're infringing that particular patent. One other point about design arounds and patent infringement is that I'm doing this analysis, this example analysis, in the context of a single claim. Patents usually have 3 independent claims minimum, sometimes more. You would have to do this analysis for each independent claim of the patent. Each independent claim would have to be avoided both from the literal infringement standpoint and from the Doctrine of Equivalence standpoint. Some claims that have an apparatus claim will also have a method of operation claim. You would have to look at not only the apparatus claim to see if your product can avoid infringement of the apparatus claim, but also any method claims that the patent might have to make sure that your product isn't performing the steps of that method. Even though you may avoid the apparatus claim, you may still be caught up in infringement of the method of operation claim depending on how your product is functioning. So the analysis has to look at each independent claim of the patent. What about dependent claims? Do you need to look at dependent claims? Generally, if you can be sure that you're not infringing the independent claims, so let's say there are 3 independent claims of the patent you're concerned about, and you've done your design around analysis. Your design around analysis concluded that you're not literally infringing any of the independent claims, whether they be apparatus or method claims. Then, in that case, you don't have to worry about the dependent claims. If you're not infringing the independent claims, the dependent claims wouldn't be usable to continue an infringement argument against you. If you're missing one of the limitations in the independent claims, well, the dependent claims require that all the limitations of the independent claims also be present. Remember, for a dependent claim is adding something to the subject matter of an independent claim. Therefore, for the dependent claim to be infringed, all the limitations of the independent claim must be present in the accused product, and the extra subject matter added by the dependent claim must also be present for the dependent claim to be infringed. Again, to conclude, if your analysis determines that you're not infringing any of the independent claims, whether they be apparatus or method claims, you don't have to worry about dependent claims. They're already covered by your analysis of the independent claims.